In today's episode, we are discussing 3 topics. Bryan Kohberger's ties to law enforcement, and was he set up? Did the police work backwards to make the evidence fit their narrative? And the May 23rd hearing. As always, everything we discuss is for entertainment and is speculation. Please like and subscribe, and definitely join our discussion in the comments. If you're ready, let's get into it. Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello.
So we are continuing our discussion on the Idaho 4 case today, and we're going to be covering BK's possible connection to law enforcement and some items current day. With that, there was a hearing the other day, so that's what we're going to be talking about. But we're so excited that we have some new subscribers and a lot of comments on our last episode. So we thought we would do a little comment corner, and there were a lot of good points and some interesting ideas that were posted. So I want to share some of those. See what your thoughts are.
Let's do it.
All right.
Let's get right into it.
Our viewer Tansy said that there are a lot of other things out there. Look into the frats, law enforcement, who own the house. So those 3 things. And we kind of hit on that in our last episode.
Well, we talked about, the current tenants, the previous tenants a little bit. We kind of missed the mark on that a little bit. I don't think we ever got into who the owner of the house was. We did know that the university president grew up there, but might be something to, ease into a little bit. Well,
this made me think of how these theories that are out there, they're rooted in some facts. So, like, if you look across, this made me think of if you look across the United States, there have been a lot of Greek row affiliations with houses that have had some major drug busts across the country. So that is not unfounded to have that happen. So, yeah, good point on that one. Mimi said that, talking about the college president, that not because I had mentioned him being at like press conferences and things
inserting
like that.
Himself,
but
yes.
Yeah, definitely inserting himself.
What did Mimi say exactly?
Just that he wasn't only inserting himself in the press conferences, but in the whole investigation. So
okay.
You have to
maybe take a look at something like that. Although, nosy people are nosy people, but, and plus, nosy maybe on the bad side, but maybe on the good side, let's take it off maybe a conspiracy and say, this is his college. This is his livelihood. This is his business. This is something that he's passionate about. He wouldn't have got into education if he wasn't, right? I know that's a lot of the things people are saying about BK. He wouldn't have got into this if he wasn't passionate about it. So we have to use kind of the same talking points for each, but
right. But
there could always be issues, though.
When we talked about the sale of the house, they got the owner to sell it to the university so that the university could make the decision to demolish it.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a big one.
For sure.
That's a big one. So then Paco had a lot of good points. So I'm just going to go through a few of those. When we were talking about Maddie's jacket, his comment was about that that makes it look like she was running, right, to find a jacket outside somewhere, and that it either could have gotten pulled off or slipped out of to run away from attackers. So that's an idea that I've heard talked about on social media too. Just makes it look that way. Why would that be out there?
I agree. If that's something she was wearing and they got a ride home, you figured be close to the door. Why aren't they, in the house safely with all the items that you're wearing? Odd that it was hanging on a fire hydrant. But
another discussion around that was that it was a signal, the jacket being outside. Paco also said, and we're going to talk about this in this episode, how they rushed to one person as the suspect and that it's the wrong police work. And also that they cleared people way too quick. And even the father of one of the victims has said that. So
I can't tell you how many true crime, documentaries or just on television, Datelines or whatever that, they always say, such a rush to judgment, this person happened to be the last person that saw them, or, there's a little bit of circumstantial evidence. So we're going to focus on this person and make all the evidence fit that person instead of expanding your investigation. So, I mean, there's certainly some merit to that.
And the big issue around that is that that college evacuated, like the kids left right away. So anyone who could have been at the house that morning, because we do know that they called friends over to the house in the morning before calling 911. And I guess the evidence of that is that law enforcement was even asked in a press conference, like, do you know everybody that was there when you showed up? And that's the famous quote, I don't even know that answer, when the chief of police was asked. And they just let the kids leave, right away within, days or whatever. So a comment also by Paco about the GPS. And I feel this is what's leading up to the next hearing that they're going to be having. So we'll talk about the hearing they just had a couple days ago. And that they think that there's 5 other suspects that they could potentially think about, like, instead of BK, like there's 5 other suspicious people out there. I can probably think of 3 or 4, but.
And unfortunately, we're not privy to how many of those people were talked to and cleared, and why did they clear them, right? I think it would be more suspect if, Idaho PD came out and said, we cleared them because of this. And then, this internet community said, well, that's odd. We have them here, based on, these camera footages and things like that. But without knowing, we would assume that, they've been cleared for one thing or another. But it still goes back to the original point. Did you check alibis thoroughly? Did you, follow through with, checking a lot of the cameras to make sure that, they don't show similar things that this white Elantra and other things are showing to move you off of that. So
right. And the reason that's an issue is because we're finding out now through these current hearings that are happening now that maybe they didn't collect things right away or look at things right away. Well, then how did you clear people? I don't know. Those are my questions.
I might have heard that hearing a little bit differently, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. So to lead us into what we're going to talk about today a little bit too is that Paco also said pings and bad pictures of a Hyundai Elantra. Like, I agree with that. Like, that seems what they went into suspecting BK with, phone pings. And we say bad pictures of a white Elantra because they're blurry. It doesn't look like they have a license plate number or anything like that. So, right. And then turning that to fit their narrative.
Sure. Understand, why there's questions around that for sure.
We're having a lot of discussion in our comment section, so please join in on that.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Let's pick up where Paco left off.
Yeah.
And I think there was some question about, how does Bryan Kohberger have connection to law enforcement? And I think one of the things I had heard kind of early on was that he had signed up for a fellowship, an internship or something. What can you tell me about that?
Okay. It was the spring of 2022. So April of 2022, he applied for, and I looked into this, so it was called an assistantship to be a type of data specialist, which is what he specialized in with his criminology studies. And it looked like the description of the position would be someone who would work within the law enforcement to analyze data that they have in different programs, looking for ways to improve things.
I think when you first told me about it, you had mentioned something. He was kind of targeting rural areas because they didn't have probably a lot of the equipment.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about that, because that seems to fit, if, hey, I want to do this in this particular area or something, it kind of fits something specific, that he wanted to assist people with.
I don't know if I know that specifically, but that sounds like that makes sense.
Yeah.
Bigger cities are going to have all the newest programs and all of that. So focusing on rural areas to bring them into what type of an infrastructure type system you might need, or how to better use programs that you have, stuff like that.
Right. And he could be the expert in teaching them. So, the equipment that they may need is a person with the skill
and knowledge.
and knowledge that could take all of these cloud-based programs, or things that are available to you, and utilize them to the best of your ability. We know in the hearing coming up that current people in, trying to use some of those, either cloud-based or software programs are
not so expert.
So this almost fits. I mean, it makes sense. Now,
it does make
two
sense.
Different police departments, right? that we're talking about here, but still it makes sense for that type of area. So understood.
I did want to clarify that, because in our previous episode, we said he applied to the Moscow Police Department, and there's no evidence of that I have heard of. He definitely applied to the Pullman, Washington Police Department, which is, he went to the University of Washington, so that makes sense. I don't know. If I was applying and trying to get into that kind of a position, and there's two universities within 20 minutes of each other, you might apply to more than one. But I don't even know if Idaho offered something like that. So he definitely applied to the Pullman, Washington,
Excellent.
Police Department. And then we were watching a video where they were questioning the chief of police about it, right? Like, did he get hired? Because that's the big question. So he applied, he interviewed, he was one of 4 candidates. That's what I know. But I don't know if we know for sure. We don't know for sure if he got hired or not. And the chief said, when asked, I don't know if I can comment on that. I have to check with my attorney.
Right. And if I was a conspiracy theorist, I would take that answer and be like, oh, they don't want to say that he was working for them,
Right.
and all that. I take it as they're under a gag order. Sort of there are certain things that they are and are not allowed to share with the public. And I think the chief of police, or whoever this person was, did absolutely 100% the right thing. Let me go back and make sure that I can provide you that answer legally.
I could see it that way.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to speak to about his possible connection with law enforcement and his education training. How much of an expert was he? He had already earned his bachelor's degree and master's degree in criminology, and specializing in this like forensic data, type systems. I'm not saying it right. I'm sure there's a more official way. But he studied under Catherine Ramsland was her name. And she's very famous. And she wrote the book, How to Catch a Killer. And she recommended him for this PhD program. So that speaks a lot that she thought highly of him. And she's also quoted as saying he's one of the best students that she's ever had. So
Good. Good.
It's just information.
So okay. So let's hypothesize just a little bit and say that, okay, maybe Bryan did work with the police in some way. You know, he certainly had access to some lab equipment, probably at the university, not knowing if he had any of that, access anywhere else or anything that would be cross-contaminated with open cases or anything like that. But, there is some speculation that I have heard that he could be a patsy and that he's being framed, and that one of the two or both of the police departments are involved in this. And, I say I would need to hear and see a lot to convince me of that. But what are some of the smaller things that you've heard that makes you say, could be?
The biggest one to me is, why not just say if he got hired, that he got hired, and they're not saying he didn't get hired. Like, it's not being commented on at all, so they're hiding that. That's suspicious. If he was hired, he's gonna, like you said, he's gonna have access to way more law enforcement programs, and then that's where people are saying, okay, and his job is to actually go in there and analyze. So the job stated analysis is part of that position. So you go in and you start looking at stuff. What do you find? What do you see?
So I think I remember you talking about, that there probably is, and it could or could not be related to maybe some of the drug stuff that could be happening. You mentioned Greek Row and, frat houses and all that stuff. And I've heard it mentioned in the past in some podcasts that the police could be involved in that. I think we talked about it in one of our episodes that, you would hope they wouldn't, but, hey, I want to buy the baby new shoes and, I need a few extra dollars. And hey, if I do this one little thing for maybe $1,000, what's the big deal? And all of a sudden it snowballs out of control. Totally hypothetical, but you never know. And maybe Bryan, if he was working or just through his, involvement in the community, maybe found out something and maybe was a part of, hey, this is kind of crooked and I think I'm going to have to tell some people. And with that, he got caught up in something that he had nothing to do with.
Yeah, haven't seen that theory completely vetted out to exactly how that could lead to all this, because I keep thinking, to your point, if he was ratting them out, what do they do to rats? Like, why would you let him just arrest him, just set him up for something to be arrested? Because he still could speak. He still could spill what he knows.
Be careful, you're coming over here.
I know. So I do see that side of it.
Yeah.
I do see that side of it. But there's lots of more complications. Like, did he know something was going down, or like that? Oh my goodness. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, insert with, is something going down, insert something with drugs, corruption, whatever words you want to use, in that, which doesn't seem overly plausible from where I sit. Why would these students be why would they be murdered?
Right.
I mean,
that's the big question,
Yeah.
because we're not, it just, things don't make sense. This makes me think about how in the comments, someone said that the frats, wouldn't be able to set him up the way if it was a setup, because they wouldn't have access to those types of things. So, but when you look at conversations online about that. It's not just the frats by themselves. It's like a conglomerate of maybe some crooked people, and which are just the speculations. We're not accusing anybody or anything like that. We're just talking about what have been the talking points about this case.
And, sitting back from, the common sense side of this, at least in my mind, that this is a pretty elaborate plan to frame somebody or to quiet down somebody or whatever. If this is an elaborate plan, and it doesn't make sense in my mind, but there would have to be a lot of people involved in this. A lot of people. And I mean, this is pretty sophisticated for just trying to get at or frame one person. So that gives me a little pause, on that one. But I do want to morph to, if it's okay with you, I don't know if you have anything else on this. You do, so let's hear it.
Because you mentioned nobody's talking. And that has been another huge issue with this case. All the college kids left campus and dispersed out into the world immediately. None of them have been speaking.
Publicly.
What do you mean publicly?
Yeah, to society, but they've spoken to the police.
Oh, right. We don't have access to that.
Right.
So, what I'm saying is, nobody's gone on the news. Nobody's done interviews. Nobody's, leaked anything.
Why is that?
Why is that?
I have an answer for that.
Well, so do I.
Okay, let's hear your answer.
I think they're afraid.
And I think they're under a gag order. A legally binding gag order.
If there's someone who's connected to the case.
They're under a gag order.
There's thousands of other kids that partied in that house, were part of frats and sororities that knew those people, that know things.
So so the nobody is getting me maybe. Maybe not some key players in this that you want to hear from, but I've seen podcasters say, well, this is so-and-so, and this is the father of this person, or this is, a friend of a person over here. A bunch of podcasters interviewed a bunch of people. I've watched Dateline 48 Hours, newscast. Bunch of people are talking heads on that as well.
They only talked about their relationships.
So people who are involved in the case are under a gag order.
Okay.
All right.
Nothing's been really leaked from college, except I did say that one brave college student who lived in that neighborhood came forward and said, hey, I live close by. Hey,
the guy who's harassed a lot.
Time. No, that's the cat guy.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He's talking about Enon, that crazy neighbor. Yeah. He's funny. I love him. We'll talk about Enon another time. Yeah. He doesn't really fit into this right now.
But I was trying to morph to, so say it's not necessarily a big conspiracy framing. We want to make him the patsy. We're going to teach some people a lesson and don't mess with Idaho police, right? And all that.
Right.
But let's call it ineptitude. That,
could be.
We got a little bit of evidence that, I got this DNA, so that's a good place to start. Lab says, hey, we got some DNA, run it through CODIS. It's on potentially the sheath of the murder weapon, right? Mm-hmm. This is a big piece of evidence. We need to find out who that is. And the moment they find out through genealogy who it is and some comparative DNA analysis, they find out it's Bryan Kohberger. Now, oh, wait a minute, this white vehicle that ultimately turned into the make and model that Bryan Kohberger drives seems to be a piece of evidence that fits. The towers that are pinging with his phone, even though his phone was off, most of the time, puts them near and around the area before and after the crime, right? So now we got these 3 pieces of evidence, all based on the original one that some people think could have been planted. Some people think could have been, hey, we didn't even plant it. We just, hey, run this, and
Yeah, right.
right, you don't even have to try to take it off a sheath,
We
here.
didn't even pretend to find it in the house.
Right, just, hey, run
We're
this.
just joking.
But I think ultimately you got that piece of DNA. It landed you on somebody who was in the proximity. I'm going to focus on that. And we talked in a very early episode that there are other male DNA unidentified, just like Koberger's was, that they decided not to do genealogy for, because, hey, I'm going to do the top one, which is the murder weapon holster and not, the button on the lampshade. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
we don't know
we don't know where they're from, but they probably took the most impressive one where they got some DNA and said, hey, let's look further.
So I want to backtrack for a second because it looks like, based on the timeline and evidence that has come out, documents that they have released, it looks like what led them to him was the car. Now, it's interesting that, and remember, this comment was made in our comments too on the last episode. As soon as he was arrested, everybody was like, oh, wow, this is the guy. Like, let's dive into him. Nobody, when he was arrested, nobody was like, it can't be, It wasn't like that. It was, okay, this is the guy. And then as evidence started coming out, it was just questions and questions. And so that's what made people, dive into things like the car, like we talked about last time, getting it wrong. And they had to extend, first they said 2011 to 2013, and then they extended it. But my point was that the defense attorney, her first question, and it has been, how did you get to my client? How did you get and land on my client? And she's trying to get the evidence from the prosecution to see that. And I feel, and many people feel, if it was such a done deal and a smoking gun, or whatever about him, turn it over. Like, let the public see. What is there to hide? And that's what makes people feel like, if you're not doing that, why not? What are you hiding?
So, can't disagree with what you're saying. I think as a citizen who's interested in this, I'd love to learn more.
They didn't do that with the Long Island serial killer case. They're like, boom, 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 here's what we got. He's the guy because of XYZ. That's it.
Yeah, we got his DNA off some pizza.
There's way more than that. There was way more than that.
But
we could talk about that case another time.
But I think we're boxed in a corner now, right? You can't bring forth unknown male DNA number 2, do genealogy, say, oh, this is so-and-so, right?
I wonder if they ran them through
And
CODIS.
yeah, because they're unknown. If they have DNA, they're going to run it through CODIS, and then they're going to spit out a name. And then, if...
You're assuming they did that.
Let's assume they didn't. Let's assume they didn't.
They
right?
did?
Let's assume they did not.
Did not. Okay.
Okay, so we have Bryan Koberger. My point was, we're already backed into a corner, right? We're backed into a corner with Bryan Koberger.
Because we've named him.
So you take unidentified male DNA, you run it through CODIS, right, to satisfy your criteria. We run it through CODIS, and we don't get a name. So we still have an unidentified male.
Got it.
We do genealogy. we get a name. That person lives 2 blocks away,
and is in the house all the time.
Is in the house all the time, whatever. But hey, DNA's in the house, not necessarily on the murder weapon because DNA didn't show up there. But how are we going to investigate him now? Because anybody who is an advocate of unknown male DNA number 2 is going to say, well, his DNA wasn't on the sheath. You don't have his car doing a 3-point turn right before the murder. You don't have his cell phone pinging off the tower, right? They're boxed in a corner.
But the online community has a whole lot of suspicious activities going on that night and around that time, and circumstances that
agreed 100%.
That person was connected to any of that, if they would have gone down any other paths, maybe they would see that.
Agreed 100%. That's what I said at the beginning of this episode, was that we watch a lot of true crime and say, why did you rush to judgment there? Right? Why did you rush to judgment? And part of me feels, maybe to answer that question, and we should answer that question, part of me feels like people in the community were terrified. They left, right? Businesses were shutting down.
Yeah, they suffered.
So, the police probably should have taken a lot more time. Although I do remember, what's taking them so long?
Right.
What are these buffoons doing? I remember hearing stuff like that. Now that they have them, it's the opposite. You guys did this way too quick. There is too much of a rush to judgment. You had way more information. You just got to play it.
They're showing us.
So I would ask you the same question. Why? Why did they announce it at that time instead of keeping it more close to the vest and investigating more people? Why do you think that they put it out there?
Well, they wanted everybody to feel safe and come back to school. That's why they did it. But our point around this part of the conversation was that one of the other ideas is that they rushed with their very first inklings of evidence, right? So the white car, we got a white car, and it's in the area at this time, and okay, so we're going to run with that. And then, we identify who that person is. Let's look at his phone. Oh, his phone is pinging. I know people who have gone out there to that area or have talked about like the cell towers that are there. And they're like, your phone's going to ping off those towers no matter where you're at. You could be like across the state line, like, because you're talking about a small area. It's a small area. So, they just ran with that too quick. And now they're like, okay, now we have a narrative. Now we have a person. We're going to try to, this is one of the ideas that people think that I'm explaining, is that they're just trying to make evidence fit what they think happened.
Right.
And it just looks more like that to me than the other way around.
I don't disagree. And that might be a good segue into the hearing the other day, because we watched that, and I must have been in some bizarro world, because everything, when the defense was asking the person questions, I was hearing, the answers I was hearing, like, it surprised me how I was like, oh my gosh, how could he answer like that? Right? I was like, why is that a bad answer? It seemed to be truthful. And then when the prosecution came up and asked questions, I kind of felt like, yeah, right, that makes sense. And it could be my bias, right? Yeah. I mean, I could say that, and it could be your bias, for sure. And so I think we talked a little bit about it, but we said, hey, maybe we should wait for the podcast. So lead into that.
Hearing that just happened, the witness was a police officer from Moscow Police Department, and he was the one that prepared evidence that led to 2 warrants for Bryan Kohberger to and they kept calling one a 48 hours warrant or whatever. And all the questions were about training, expertise, a certain program that they use to maps and pictures. Things like
so
that.
let's get into it. So we could probably talk through it. So some of the questions that the defense was asking was, what's your expertise with this program? It was CAPC or something. I don't remember the exact, let's call it,
CAST.
CAST. Okay. So what's your expertise? What's your training? I went to, a class, 24 hours one time, 16 hours another time, and I just remember there was gas, oh my God, how's a little training? And I liken it to, it's a software program, right?
Sounds like it.
Okay. So my Outlook mail is a program. The first time I ever saw it in my life, because I'm old, I was like, what do I do with this? Somebody sat down with me for 5, 10, 20 minutes and said, here's how you receive an email, here's how you do an email, and the more you use it, you're going to learn a little bit more, but here's the basics in how to work this program, right?
Sounds like what he had.
Yeah. So he had, instead of 5 to 10 minutes, he had 24 hours one time and 16 hours another time on this program. So it's a software program. So you input information into this program. So that's what I took from it. Did you understand it to be something different?
Yeah, so the issue is that this detective testified at the grand jury as the expert in this information that came from that program. And he said that when he testified. I was asked to do this, or I did this because of the grand jury hearing, which there was another shocker, that he actually said that, because what happened at the grand jury has been secret. So that hasn't really been spoke about. So that was a big one. The defense attorney, number one, she's trying to get the information.
Yes.
Number two, she's trying to make sure that they're not hiding information. Number three, she's trying to make sure that they didn't tamper with any of the information. And I feel that a lot of the people that were watching that hearing heard scenarios where it didn't sound like you could 100% say that it was done the right way, that the work was done the right way. That's the way I took it.
Yeah, I didn't take it that way. Let me explain how I saw it. Then you explain
what the program
let me explain how I saw the testify, because we're going to get stuck on, maybe the first question. So let me just say what I think the whole thing is. And then you tell me the counterpoint to that, because the way I understood it was he was issued 2 warrants. One was a 48-hour time frame of, probably a little bit before, maybe a little bit after the time of the crime. Then he was issued another warrant to run it through this CAST system. He was given another warrant that had much more data. I don't think he said how much it was, but it was supposed to be expanded. I don't know if a week before to a week after. I didn't catch that, because it was hard to hear some of that. But he kept repeating over and over again that this second piece of information had way more data than the 48-hour one. So the 48-hour one, he took all that data that came in 2 forms, either text or a Adobe PDF or something like that. He took the text data, slid it into the program, and the only thing that he said he changed was to make sure that the timestamp, because, if we travel a lot, when I go to, Central Time Zone, my computer flips. So he wanted to make sure that everything was at Pacific time. He said, that's the only thing that I changed. So he takes this file, he dumps it in there, the system does its little work and spits out, some information. And one of them was a map, right?
I believe so.
Okay. He took a screenshot of that map, right? So the one thing it's spitting out is a map. So he takes a screenshot of that map and puts it over here. And then there was another thing that, again, I didn't really understand, but it included like the log and all this stuff. And he ran like a little screen recording of that, and he put that over here. So I think what the defense was getting at is, hey, can you recreate that work? Because you didn't save it. Right. So to us, that's suspicious. Why didn't you save it? And he's like, well, I typically don't, because all I need to do is go back to the 48-hour data, grab that file, slide it into the CAS system, change the time to Pacific time, and it's going to give me the exact same thing because the data doesn't change. And for, I think, the defense, they kept saying, what program are you using? Is it number 33? Is it number 38? And he's like, I got the same thing.
Okay. So 2 things that I was thinking of. One was my understanding of the program. My understanding was the opposite of you. What I heard you say is that he was given a warrant and then went in to do work for it.
Yes.
Okay. My understanding is he was producing work or evidence that would be used for
the grand jury. No, for the grand jury. No, there were 2 warrants that were issued. One for 48 hours worth of data of Kohlberger's phone.
But if you
and then there was another one for a longer period of time. And
I get
so
that.
He was given both of those, and he was asked by the prosecution, can you run these on this CAS system so we could take that to the grand jury?
But that just seems backwards to me. Like
that's physically what they said.
I understand that. That doesn't mean it's right.
Well, the defense didn't argue that. Not yet.
It's coming. She just wanted to get to the bottom of, what did you do? What did you do? Like, she does baby steps, right? She wanted to know, are you the expert? Because he said many times during this hearing, I'm not the one running this. Someone else is.
Right.
I was asked to go in and do this.
Right.
Why did we ask, are you the only one that has a little bit of training in this program? Is that why? And that could be benign, to go in and do it. But my understanding was that they were getting the evidence that they used for the warrants or something like that. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Let us know in the comments. Which one is it? It was hard to follow because the judge live streams the trial on his YouTube channel, and then everybody else streams it, and their audio is horrible.
Yeah,
and
it's hard.
If you're watching it, in someone's live, people are making comments and things like that, so it's hard to follow.
Well, we actually stopped it and turned on closed captioning.
Yeah, we had to have the closed captioning.
Because it was almost impossible
Yeah.
to kind of, and who knows if closed captioning was 100% accurate, but it seemed okay.
And it's confusing because it's, technical jargon that, we're not familiar with. And I watched it, listened to it, more than 3 times.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
So to continue on this point, so what I took from the defense, what they were looking for, I think what the point of him up there was a couple things. Like, okay, why are you put in charge of this? Which I think he answered, look, I'm not the lead investigator here, but I can provide some information based on my expertise, which doesn't mean I'm the smartest guy in the world on this system, but in our little community, I'm the one guy who got the training on the CAS system, right? So they asked me to do it. That's the way I took it. I think I have sympathy, empathy, understand where the defense was going with this, because they were trying to find out, okay, why were you considered the expert? What did you do with the data? Why did it take us until yesterday to finally get the data?
And he looked at it that day for the first time.
Yeah.
and couldn't remember if he opened things or not the day before. That was suspicious.
No, I don't think he said that.
He did. Let us know in the comments. I know he did. I don't remember. I don't recall. He said that a bunch of times.
Right. But he said...
it was yesterday. Like it was
No, he said clearly, I only opened it yesterday. She's like, well, did you open it previous to the... No, I think I just took it from the email, however I got it, and just put it into a folder. I can't remember if I opened it or not, but I didn't re-look at it because my job was done for the grand jury, and I just put all this stuff in the folder. It wasn't until yesterday that I knew I was coming here that I re-look at it and make sure I sent everything to the prosecution, is exactly what he said.
Okay.
I mean, did you hear something different?
I literally heard him say, I don't remember, about the day before. Yes.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
I'll play it for you later.
Okay, yeah. So I know the defense attorney kept asking him, did you got this file, did you open up that file? I don't remember. I got that 12 months ago. I don't remember if I opened it. I know I drug it in this folder because when I looked at it yesterday for the first time in forever, I was like, oh,
There was some of that.
Yeah. Okay.
But there definitely was a question about the day before. And just to go back to his training. Okay, so the training for that program, she actually handed him the...
certificates?
Not only the certificates, but the manual of the training. And you should have 500 hours of training in that. That's a lot for a program like you were trying to minimize. I think this program, what it sounded like to me was something you go into that creates, they kept using the word session. So you go into it, and this is just, I'm just explaining what I heard and the way I made sense of it. That you go into this program, you bring in your own data, whatever that is, pictures, videos, whatever evidence you have, and it seemed like a shared file, a shared system, because he made comments about, well, I didn't do that, the FBI did. So these were documents that were in this system. They were already in there. He even said he tried to open one and he thought he could use that whole file because it was bigger than the others, and he wasn't able to, and he didn't know why. And I thought it was even funny because the defense attorney asked him, well, can you use it? And he's like, or how would you use it? He's like, well, I'm sure it's useful to somebody, because he couldn't get it to work or whatever. So when you're in there, to me, it sounded like you're creating a session that is documenting what you're doing. And I feel that's a way to be transparent. These are legal documents that are going to be used in court, and you want to make sure there's nothing corrupt or nefarious going on with evidence. You have to try. That's why there's a chain of custody with evidence. It's got to be the same thing with digital, right? How has all evidence in the old days used to be concrete evidence, bagged and tagged and stored somewhere. Now we have digital evidence. What's the chain of command for that? And I think that might be part of what they're trying to prove with that. So when he said, well, I didn't bother to save it. I didn't run a session. I just took a screen recording. Well, that doesn't prove what you did, and that was her point. How do I know and trust what you did when you were in there? And that's the way I took it.
Yeah. So I think he clearly stated, I just took a file and drug it in. She's like, well, how do I know? Your log, I see the log here, but I'd like to, see it on the screen, have it recreated. And he's like, well, you can do it today, right now. Take the same file and drag it in and change the time, and it will output the exact same thing. That's how he stated the system worked. The defense did not argue that point. What they should do is take the file, drag it into the system, and see if it outputs the same thing. If the map looks the same, okay. If it looks completely different, hey, whatever your name is, we need to have a further conversation with you.
Right.
Okay.
And, I don't know if she has access to that system. That's why she's relying on their work. That's her question.
Right.
About that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, certainly if you want to challenge something, especially with the the eyes on this case, I'm sure somebody, would assist her. And I have to give the defense credit here too. Let me just take another minute on this before we maybe move off it a little bit. But her knowledge to ask a lot of the right questions was really good. And the way I understood it was this kind of came up yesterday, where they finally got the information that he finally provided all. So she got it the previous day, took in all that information, looked at it as much as she could.
24 hours.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy.
And then this person had to come in early because they couldn't make the aforementioned hearing that you were talking about. So within that time frame, she had, a good set of line of questions, which I wanted to know the answers to. And
she didn't have everything because after I listened to it a few more times, I was listening for that. She did have a lot of it and I thought that same thing, like, wow, how did you go through all of that in 24 hours? But you do what you got to do. But even at the hearing, there were things she still was not given, and she asked, Will I have access to that? Are you giving me that? Have you sent, will you be sending me that? So there were still some things that had to come her way.
And the other point on that was, so I think the defense did a really good job asking those questions. It was also telling that the Idaho police or this, sub-investigator by themselves, with the spotlight on this case and a lot of energy around, we're not getting this information and he had all this stuff in his files. Why didn't he gather all this prior to his court hearing? I think if there's anything nefarious, and I say nefarious loosely, but if there's anything suspect here is you got all this information from the FBI supposedly, or from the AT&T, I think it was, that it comes in this raw data form. He put it in folders. Why not just send it to the prosecution so his hands are clean? He just kept them in a folder, and then when the prosecution asked, then he sent it. So I would like to know in the comments, is it typical for the prosecution or the defense to ask for this before they just turn over? Or shouldn't you just be turning over everything? I mean, I guess that's vague.
I don't know.
Well, he said he did.
He did so say he's there a lot, but there were a couple things that, because the prosecutor kept saying, we don't have it.
Yeah, but
I think it took the FBI that long. The FBI probably just dumped it in there the day before, like a couple of things.
So he's under perjury.
Like to me.
So he's under perjury. So when the question was asked, when did you receive this? And he said months ago.
Well, it wasn't just one thing.
Okay, but I'm just saying, you're twisting what he's saying. I want to go with the actual words that were being said, and that's what I want to talk about. Is he said, I received this months ago, but didn't turn it over. I find that a little suspect. Like, just turn it over. Or do you have to be asked for it? I don't understand that whole chain of command on that stuff. But I think what you're saying is, well, he probably just didn't get it all till yesterday. He is under perjury, and I mean, for something this small in this, why would I want to go to prison for, saying, if I got it yesterday, I'd be like, well, I got it yesterday.
I don't think he was lying. There was more than one document they were talking about.
Yeah.
So you are right. There were some things that he said that he had for months, and I didn't look. I put them in a folder, and that was what stood out to me. Also, is the way he described every time they got a video. I think it was mostly video she was asking about at that point. Every time he got some video surveillance, he would just get it, name it, put it in a file. Get the next one individually. So there was no grouping of like, oh, these are the neighborhood house cameras. Like, it was, I was like, oh wow, that was, because it made sense to me too, because it seemed like the defense was struggling to go through everything and
I agree
find
with that.
stuff.
Yeah.
And if you're getting one folder at a time of one video, oh my goodness, to go through all of that. And if it's just named like, Linda Lane 1 or King Road 2, you got to go in there and what is this and what's in here? I couldn't believe he said that.
I couldn't believe he said that either. Because I didn't hear it. Number one, so I'm going to go back and.
There's a lot to miss. You have
to
watch
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
There's
I know.
a lot to miss in there. So how well the defense was able to ask the right kinds of questions about this system. So she is rumored to be working with a expert in a special kind of data program, like using GPS. So instead of just like cell tower data where things are pinging, to get more specific, maybe you start there with the pings, but then being able to drill down more with GPS or like geofencing, they call it. I don't know, type of data. And this guy's name is Cy Ray, and his track record and resume is pretty impressive, and he usually works with prosecutors. He's worked with prosecution teams all over the country, but he's working with the defense.
Yeah.
So number one, why didn't the prosecution get him to work with them? And I'm sure he was helping to, it seemed to me like those questions and I think he's going to make an appearance at the next hearing. So I think that next hearing is going to be all about this digital evidence and all of that.
So let's put that in the layman's terms. So if we take a walk, right? You're saying that if you and I took a walk and we wanted to map our route, we wouldn't necessarily know it because cell towers are pinging all over the place and they can't have you.
Right.
But if we turn on GPS, right, it knows us within 20 feet where we're at. So the little heart that's on your iPhone and iWatch,
all our phones.
It can pinpoint you within 20 feet radius or something. So I get the cell tower data stuff, like is it pinging off different towers and how much are they able to? But the GPS, you're right, is something that really can pinpoint where you are if it's turned on, right?
And remember, his alibi was, I'm way over here.
Stargazing.
At a park.
Yep.
Nowhere in the area. How are you going to prove that? How is he? I think they're starting to try to prove that.
Right.
So May 30th is this next hearing, and I think it's going to be a big one. I don't think it's open. I think they're closing that one. Which
no.
But we'll see. This last one, they let it be open. As long as they kind of talked vaguely about things, which they did. They did a really good job of doing that. So I don't know. I hope we get to see it. But
so if we do, then maybe that's something we could talk about in our next episode. But if they don't, and we have to do some digging and read some transcripts and, wait for something to come out, maybe we could talk. There was a frat fight the night of or somewhere in the vicinity of when this happened. Yes. So there's some speculation around that.
Lots of speculation about that.
And I think you'd called there's another suspicious person out there that maybe we want to talk about. You call him a private driver. I thought it was an Uber or maybe a friend that picked up the girls from the grub truck and took them home.
That's who it is.
Okay.
And they clarified right away. Probably the Uber company didn't want to be associated with that night. So they just called this person the private driver.
Oh, because it wasn't necessarily an Uber
right,
log.
It sounds like a service in the area. Who
Gotcha.
knows?
Okay. That makes sense.
And yeah, a lot of questions about that. Plus, that's the last person that saw the two of the victims that night. So that should always be a person of interest.
Strong person of interest.
Yeah, there are a lot of other theories, and those are two big ones.
Yeah.
Like, if not Bryan, then who else and why? Why was this done? So those two.
Private driver, I like that one because you're right. Go to the last person that saw them alive. grill them for 8 straight hours in the middle of the night, with the air conditioning turned on really high, whatever it is, you need to do. I agree with that one. And because the people that were called over the morning after the crime were associated with the frats before the police were called, it kind of brings into question, well, what's their role in this? Why are they inserted into this murder mystery immediately, even before the police are? So a lot of things could have happened in that time frame that may have changed the game here a little bit.
Yep.
So those are 2 good points. Hopefully we get to those if the hearing doesn't supersede that. But either way, I'm interested in talking about all 3.
Yep. We'll see you back here on our next episode. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.